friends, I'm Lunastrations. Welcome back to my channel. It's the middle of August by the time I'm writing this intro, which means ArtFight 2025 is well behind us. I thought it could be fun to make a little recap video about my ArtFight season. And when I said little, I mean at least an hour long. I promise I did not intend for this. But hey, this video might be a good one to turn on to listen to while you're trying to draw or do homework. This was my 5th year doing ArtFight, and for the past 2 seasons I've set some goals for myself, the major one being to reach 15 attacks in a season. I've always been a slower artist, and I've wanted to increase my art output and decrease the amount of time it takes to finish a drawing, so I've been using ArtFight to work on this goal. Last year I made it to 12 attacks, which was a new record, but I wanted to push myself even further this year, and I did by a long shot. I created 25 attacks this year. I'll be going through the creation of almost all of them in this video, as well as most of my attacks that I received back. Everything is in timeline order, and if you notice a couple of attacks missing, or like a gap in the numbering of my attacks, that's because there were a couple artists that did not want or respond to the inclusion of their character in this video, and that's okay. I encourage you to check out their characters and my attacks on them through our ArtFight pages. My username is just Lunastrations, and you can reach the rest of the artists through my attacks on them or their attacks on me. And the credits for each artist will be displayed on screen, and hopefully in the description as well if YouTube lets me. Before the video starts, I have just a couple of quick notes. First, a lot of people have critiques about how ArtFight is run or how other artists play the game, and I'm open to those discussions, and I think other people's feelings about it are valid, but this video won't really be going over anything like that. It's just for me to show off my work and my growth for this season, and I'm not really aware of all of everyone's feelings or arguments, so I don't feel like it would be very appropriate to go over that here. Second, this video can get very repetitive, as my process tends to be a bit similar between all of my drawings and attacks, so I apologize for that. Feel free to skip around the video as you see fit if that's going to be a problem. With those disclaimers out of the way, let us begin! The first attack I did for this year was for my good friend Beelzebub and their OC Spice. She's a witch, and her profile says that she's a lovely airhead who can make anyone smile. I really enjoy how soft her design is. Her hair is so fluffy, and her dress looks so cozy and poofy, and her demeanor is sweet and almost motherly. I went in knowing that I wanted to draw her in kind of a pinup style drawing. My vision for her attack was something like what you would see in an old manor, like a big painting you would see on the mantle of a fireplace. I drew Spice sitting on some drapery next to a pumpkin with a simple background. For this style of drawing, I chose to use some smaller weight line art with a thicker lining around the character. This is basically the Maricune method, which is thick lines on the outside and thin lines on the inside. Normally when I ink my drawings, I use Procreate 6B sketching pens, and that's what I used here as well. I decided to fully render this attack so I could show off how soft her hair and dress are. I don't always enjoy rendering hair since it takes a very long time for me to do, but I actually had a lot of fun with Spice's hair. It's probably because of how curly her hair is. And I'm not the biggest fan of rendering drapery, and I didn't want this attack to take too long to make, so I did some simple rough shading for the drapery in the background. When I was done with all the rendering, I merged all my color layers and put a gradient multiplier layer to add some darkness around the border of the drawing. Then I added an orangish overlay and a solid white border, which is something I do for almost all of my drawings, and 10% noise, and then she was done. If I could go back and change anything, I would probably go back and fix the pumpkin because she looks just a little bit funky. Thank you, Belza. I had so much fun drawing Spice. My second attack was for user Neotomic and his OC Tsubaki, aka Cure Daisy. She's the first of many pre-cure attacks of the year from me. Daisy is a fan cure from Neotomic's Earthy Precure. Her profile says Tsubaki is a popular girl, but that's because she's so kind and sisterly. She's a pink cure who represents the season of spring and is a nurturing, sweet person who wants to bring out the best in people. When I first found her while scrolling through the Precure tag on the ArtFight site, I knew I had to draw her. One of my favorite Precure design tropes is the pink cure with blonde hair. I eat it up every time. Once again, I had a vision going into this drawing. I wanted Daisy sitting in and around some lush greenery and flowers. This art fight, one of my more minor goals was to draw hands as much as I could, as opposed to like hiding them behind a character's back or clothes. Hands are my worst enemy as an artist, but I fear I won't get any better with them if I don't practice. For this attack, I wanted to try drawing Tsubaki holding her face on a hand, and I think it turned out well. Like Spice, I really enjoy drawing her hair. It's really flowy, and I especially enjoy her bangs. Her skirt and sleeves are very poofy, and I try to convey that through my line art. For this attack, I used medium line art, and this time I did not add the thicker line art on the outside. I decided to do some simple rendering to save time, but I made sure to include her makeup. Cure Daisy has very subtle pink eyeshadow, blush, and lipstick. When it was time to do the background, I struggled a little bit because I knew I wanted to draw greenery, but I wasn't sure how I wanted to go about drawing it. I went with kind of a hedge for the background. I drew some repeated leaves and vines with some swirls and a bunch of itty-bitty pink daisies to make up the hedge. I used a gouache brush to paint in the grass and flowers in front of and behind Tsubaki. And I think I used a pinkish multiplier layer over everything, and then I added my border and noise, and then the attack was complete. Cure Daisy was one of my favorite attacks for this year. I really enjoy her design, and I would love to know more about her and her fan cure team. Thank you so much, Neotomic. My fourth attack was for user Invader Glitch and her OC Ace. She has a card/gambling motif, and she's a magical girl, of course. Her profile says that she's a risk-taking, adrenaline-seeking gal who loves nothing more than a challenge. She gives me big Queen of Hearts vibes, so I knew I wanted to draw her on a heart-shaped throne. I'm not used to drawing props like chairs, but I wanted to give it a shot with this attack. I probably didn't start my sketch the best way. I drew the pose first and then the throne, whereas I probably should have started with the throne and then drew the pose afterwards. I gave her some sassy vibes in her pose since she seems like such a diva. I had to take a couple artistic liberties with some of the proportions in her design, specifically with her hair. In Ace's reference picture, her hair is super long and it's all the way down to her feet. In my attack, I still wanted her hair to be really long, but I did shorten it just a tad so her boa could still have its own shape in her silhouette. I used medium line art for everything, and then outlined Ace and her throne separately from each other with some thicker line art. I fully painted this attack. Ace is another character with really flowy hair, so I showed that through my shading. Though while I was shading, her dress and gloves kind of blended together a bit, so I gave her gloves a sparkly texture with a sparkle brush and a screen layer. I was the bittiest bit nervous about shading her boa, but I really just used random flowing strokes, and that was enough to give it the texture I was hoping for. I really liked shading the plush on the throne. I was able to make it look super puffy. The last thing I did was painted in some shadows on the platform and around the border, and then I added my border and my noise, and then her attack was done. I had lots of fun drawing Ace. She seems like such a diva, and I love her outfit. Thank you, Invader Glitch. At this point in the month, I got my first attack. This one is from another one of my good friends, Rainburst Wabunta, and they attacked me with my magical girl ballerina Anastasia. Rainburst drew her ice dancing under a spotlight. When I got this attack, I was speechless. It's so beautiful and detailed. Like, they even included the blade marks in the ice. My dad was right next to me when I got this attack, and he had to deal with me excitedly and incoherently yapping about it. Thank you so much, Rainburst. You drew my baby Anya so beautifully. My fifth attack was for user Atomic Starcat and their OC Skye, aka Rosette. Her magical girl motif is Nebulae, but I decided to draw her civilian form, and I included the Nebulae in the background. Her profile says, Skye is peppy and sweet, she loves to stargaze more than anything. So I decided to draw her stargazing. I drew her standing on the roof of a tall building, gazing up at some shooting stars. I used some thinner liner and no thicker outer lines, and then I colored in the base colors. Before I did any shading, I actually started on the background. I used Procreate's Nebula brush to texture the sky, and then I started on the actual shading part. I added a multiplier layer over Skye and the buildings, and then went and painted over all the edges with a screen layer and the gouache brush for the backlighting. I drew in a couple subtle shadows and darkened the line art in some parts to add some contrast. I added a multiply gradient around the corners to add a little more atmosphere, and then I put in some highlights. I made sure to draw in lots of highlights in her eyes to show their reflectiveness, and I even included the reflection of a shooting star. I added more shooting stars in the background, and I think either 5% or 10% noise, and then her attack was done. I really enjoyed shading this attack. I think this one has one of the more unique lighting schemes of my lineup for this year. Thank you, Atomic Starcat. My sixth attack was for user Kikiyami and their OC, Mei Arroyo. Her profile says that though an unexpressive person altogether, Mei's beauty turns heads wherever she goes. However, all her energy goes into figuring out the minds of others. Mei's design is so gorgeous. I really like her bangs and peekaboo hairs, and the train of her dress too. Her profile also says that she's something called a messenger soul. I'm not sure what that all entails in her story, but it gave me an idea for her attack. I wanted to draw her walking through a different plane that's covered in stars. I would imagine that this otherworldly plane would also be covered in some shallow water. I didn't do much for the posing. I just drew her walking through the water and made sure to keep her eyelashes and eyebrows on the thicker side. Normally when I draw eyelashes, I line the entire lash, but this time I just lined the outside of the lashes so that I could fill them in with her hair color. The top half of the drawing looked a tad bit boring, so I also included some beads and stars hanging from whatever ceiling there is in this realm. Nothing special for the line art, I just used medium strokes and no thicker lines on the outside either. At first I thought to line the horizon line to differentiate the water from the sky, but I ended up not enjoying how that looked, so after I added all the base colors, I got rid of the horizon line. Instead, I added a gradient screen layer to where the water would be after I used the nebula tool to texture the sky. Then I added a multiply gradient layer for some simple shading, and then duplicated the background layer and set it as an overlay to make everything a little bit brighter. Finally, it was border and 10% noise time, and then she was done. Mei is genuinely so beautiful, and I really hope that I did her justice. Thank you, Kikiyami. My seventh attack was for user Flyzel and his OC Ivory. Her profile says that she's a mischievous, chaotic, and bouncy magical girl who is actually a twist villain. Woo! I wasn't sure how I wanted to draw her at first. I knew I wanted a composition that would emphasize her hair because it's so big and it could be a really cool focus for movement. I thought it would be fun to have her braid swoop up into like a circle shape and have the negative space between Ivory and her braid be filled with a sparkly space texture. I drew her in this like crouching position, like she had just jumped down to the ground from a building, all superhero-like, and then I used the circle tool to map out where her braid was gonna go. I used a thinner liner on the inside and thicker liner on the outside again, and then once I was done putting down the base colors, I started on the shading. I went really simple with the shading for this one. I did one layer of cell shading, a gradient multiply and screen layer, and then a highlight layer. I switched the line art color to purple and started on the background. I circle tooled again and made a pink and blue space texture with the blur and nebula tools. Then I outlined Ivory with white to help her contrast to the background, added some gouache stars, and 10% noise to finish the attack. I really enjoy drawing Ivory. I love her hair and her color palette, but I fear I maybe quite possibly made her braid a little bit too long, but hopefully that's not too much of an issue. Thank you, Flyzel. My next attack that I got back was from user Mizaku_Mix. This was actually my first mass attack that I've ever gotten, and she included my character Rotzel. She drew her alongside 4 other magical girls, and I was really excited when I got this attack. I've always wanted to be included in a magical girl mass attack. Rotzel looks really cute in this attack. She looks so soft, and thank you for keeping her chubby. My chubby girl heart is very, very happy. Thank you so much, Mizaku_Mix. I'm very honored to have been included. My 8th attack for the season was for user Gummy Shark and their OC Cure Pop. Me and Gummy Shark go way back, to like 2019-ish, I think. We both used to post to Medibang Paint's art posting site, Art Street, and we're both pre-Cure fan artists, so we were in the same-ish circles. We both stopped using Art Street eventually, but their style is still pretty recognizable to me. When I was scrolling the pre-Cure tag, I found Cure Pop, and I thought, hey, that kinda looks like Gummy Shark's art style. Hey, wait a minute, that is Gummy Shark's art style because that's Gummy Shark. And then I knew I had to draw Cure Pop. Her profile says that she's upbeat and full of energy, she's shy around strangers, and has a poor sense of direction, literally me by the way, and her favorite hobbies are photography and gardening. At first I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for the composition, but eventually I landed on a Polaroid picture type thing. I can imagine that Pop would take this picture in a room. Posing isn't my strongest skill, so I've wanted to get better with that this season as well, so for this attack I wanted to draw her sitting crisscross applesauce on her bedroom floor. Mainly thicker line art this time, and no thicker outer lines either. I decided to fully render Pop for this attack, but I chose to not detail her hair to make it seem more bubbly. When I was done rendering Cure Pop, I moved on to shading the carpet. I have never shaded a carpet before, but I wanted to give it a try. I used a multiply and screen layer, and just added random strokes with my beloved gouache brush. Then I tried playing around with the lighting, and at first I tried a darker lighting scheme, as if it was nighttime, but I wasn't the biggest fan of how that looked, so instead I scrapped the lighting and hue shifted everything just a skosh. After I was happy with the hue shift, I added the highlights and created a slightly fuzzy effect for the line art by duplicating the layer, setting it to multiply, and then Gaussian blurring it by around 3 to 5%. Which is something I do a lot for a lot of these attacks. To finish the attack, I added the Polaroid border and wanted to try some sort of message on the bottom part of the border, but I couldn't think of anything, so I just wrote Cure Pop. Obligatory 10% noise, and then the attack was done. I really like Cure Pop's design. It conveys her bubbly personality wonderfully. I think my favorite parts of her outfit are the red translucent sleeves and sock thingies. They really remind me of those gummy shoes that used to be popular when I was bitty, and I really enjoy her color palette too. If I could go back and change anything about my attack, I would probably add a little blurred multiply gradient around the borders just to add like a little bit more atmosphere. Thank you, Gummy Shark. It was great seeing you again. My 3rd attack I got back this season was also the first revenge I got this season, and it's from Atomic Starcat. They decided to get me back for my attack on Skye, and I could not be happy about it because I drew my character Cure Romance, and she looks stunning. You captured her vibe so perfectly, and you included so many of her little details like all the purple stitching and ribbons. You did a wonderful job. Thank you again, Atomic Starcat. My 10th attack was for user Robot Cowboy and her OC Asteroidea. She's a magical girl and her profile says that she's a cute starfish gal. I made the executive decision to use this attack to practice backgrounds because oh boy do I need it. I hardly ever draw scenic backgrounds, so I chose to go with a scenic background for this attack. Her design has a star and starfish motif, so I drew Asteroidea walking through some shallow water on a secluded beach. I placed some chunky rocks with a little bitty starfish in the foreground to frame Asteroidea, and a tall grassy cliff in the background, and Asteroidea in the middle ground. Originally I was going to draw her with her shoes and socks on, but there's nothing I hate more than soggy socks, so I opted to draw her barefoot, and I just drew the rough shape of her feet. Her design is pretty simplified, but her dress is pretty poofy and soft, so I decided to draw her a bit curvier. I would imagine that there would be a slight breeze, so I made sure to draw her hair and dress blowing a bit with the wind. For the line art, I used a thicker line weight for the rocks, medium weight for Asteroidea, and thin weight for everything else. To add more atmosphere, I chose to set the scene at sundown. I used my handy dandy noise tool to help me texture the sand and my gouache brush to render everything else. I had a bit of a hard time shading the waves, and I'm not sure I shaded them correctly, but that's what practice is for. I didn't fully render the hair again, but I did make sure to include the stars in her hair. Then I added some clouds with the cloud tool. I used an off-white and a pink color. After everything got shaded and textured, I added 2 gradient multiply layers and a gradient screen layer over everything just to set the lighting, and then I went over Asteroidea again with one last round of multiply and screen layers. I realized that the grass part of the cliff was a little bit too flat, so I went back to paint in some blades of grass with my gouache brush. Border, 10% noise, boom, attack is done. I had a lot of fun with this attack. Asteroidea has such a pretty design, she's so ethereal and I can totally see her in this setting. I've never drawn a scene like this, so it wasn't easy to draw, but I need to yeet myself out of my comfort zone more often, and this attack was a great way to do so. Thank you, Robot Cowboy. My 11th attack was for user Rayburger and their OCs Maëlys and Sonetto. This one's a double feature because these girlies are dating. Maëlys's profile says that she's full of energy, excitement, and impulsiveness, always chasing thrills and seeking attention. She wants to impress people, but her true strength lies in her ability to bring energy, joy, and excitement to those around her. Sonetto's profile says that she's sweet, soft-spoken, and endlessly caring, always putting others' needs before her own. People often take advantage of her kindness without realizing it, and she rarely stands up for herself. Despite this, she remains hopeful, resilient, and full of love, always trying to make the world a little softer for those around her. These two are super cute together. Their personalities complement each other so well. I'm not great at drawing character interactions, but I wanted to try drawing them holding hands and being all cutesy and stuff. I use eyelash shapes to show a character's personality, and this attack is a good example of how I do that. Sonetto has a very sweet and soft personality, so I made her eyelashes more round, while Maëlys has a louder personality, so I gave her sharper lashes. Shape language, baby! For this attack, I used medium line art. After I put down the base colors, I started trying to figure out what I wanted for the background. I thought a darker background with spotlights being shown on them would be cool, but then I changed my mind and did something similar for my attack on Ivory. Then I outlined Maëlys and Sonetto with the gouache brush, added some stars to the background, and used the multiply effect for the line art again. Of course, I had to give them some blushies and a couple highlights too, and then with that, another attack was complete. These two are very cute together, and I had a lot of fun drawing them. Thank you, Rayburger! My 4th attack I got back from the season was another revenge. This one was from Robot Cowboy. She got me back for my attack for Asteroidea, and she drew Rotzel. She looks so sweet and cozy in this drawing, and I love your little doodles in the background. The paperish texture used for this attack is also very, very nice. Rotzel is so adorable in your style. Thank you for drawing her, Robot Cowboy. My 12th attack was for user Gisales and their OC Liz. Liz is a magical girl, and her profile says that she's shy, anxious, and has a pet penguin. And she has ice powers too. Her design is so soft and sweet. I thought I could do another environmental background for this one. I went with a wintry forest scene with lots of pine trees, a frozen lake, and glistening snow. I used a similar method for framing Liz as I did Asteroidea, but this time I used 2 pine trees. I drew Liz with her hands up to her face, like she's warming up her hands. I used thicker line art for the trees in the front, medium line art for Liz and the trees in the middle ground, and the thinnest line art for the lake and the trees in the background. I did use thicker lines around Liz this time though. I actually fully painted this attack. I started with the snow. I wanted to create a sparkling effect, but I wasn't sure how to do that. I think I took the easy route, and I don't know if it's really all that visible in the finished product, but I just used the sparkle tool. I shaded and textured everything with the gouache brush as usual. I've never tried texturing pine trees before. I just used lots of quick gouache strokes. I didn't do anything special while I was doing the first round of shading. I did shade her hair in detail this time though. At first I liked the lighting, but then I finished shading everything and then it seemed too boring. I went with another sunset for this one. I used a purple gradient multiply layer for the shadows and an orange gradient screen layer for the highlights. I did a second round of shading with those respective layers and colors with the gouache brush too. A detail that I really like about Liz's design is that she has blue bits on her eyelashes. I painted those in and used some purple and orange to add sort of a luster to them too. I incorporated the lighting scheme into the line art, and then I noticed something was off. There needs to be some snow on these trees. So then I went back and painted snow on all the trees. I did one last round of gradient lighting, put in my border and noise, and then her attack was done. This attack was one of, if not my most detailed attack of the year. Her attack is certainly the one that took the longest. She took almost 9 hours to complete. But that's okay, because I had so much fun drawing her. Thank you, Gisales. My 13th attack was for user Possibly Insane and their OC Odette. Odette's profile says that she's a shy girl who loves all things cute. She becomes a magical girl anytime she feels strong emotions, and when she overcomes her fears, she transforms into a magical girl. I love her design so much. I really enjoy how poofy her magical girl dress is, and her swan form is so adorable and expressive. And as a thick eyebrow haver, I really love how thick her eyebrows are. I had a couple ideas on how I wanted to go about her attack. My first idea was to draw her with my OC Anastasia, who is loosely based on Odette from Swan Lake in their magical girl forms, and I ended up passing on this idea in favor of another one. I really love all 3 of her forms, and I had a hard time picking which one I wanted to draw, so I decided to not decide at all. I drew all 3 of her forms dancing together. Admittedly, I was really nervous drawing her swan form. I typically don't branch out into drawing animals even if they're super stylized, but her swan form was worth it. A special detail about Odette's design is that she has 3 moles on her face, one on the right side of her chin, one under her left eye, and one above her right eyebrow. I made sure to include them on all 3 forms. I used medium line art for all 3 of her forms and then moved on to putting down all the base colors. I accidentally colored her eyes wrong in her magical girl form at first. They switched from green to pink, but it was a quick fix. Before I did any shading, I worked on the background. I tried using a vine pattern brush at first, but I didn't like it, so I decided on my old reliable nebula brush to make a green space background. Then I used some simple gradient shading and some quick highlights in the eyes and lashes. I drew all 3 forms on separate layers so that I could outline them with my gouache brush separately too. I added my border, stars, and noise, and then she was all done. Odette is such a sweetie. Her personality is so endearing to me, and all her designs are so wonderful. Thank you, Possibly Insane! My 5th attack I got back this year was also my 3rd revenge, and it's from Rayburger. They got me back for my attack on Maëlys and Sonetto, and they drew Miyuki. I wasn't expecting to get attacked with her this year. She has a pretty old design. The only reference image I have of her is actually from over 4 years ago at the very least, and you can tell because I don't draw eyes with the big dangly banglies anymore. Anyway, you drew her so cutesy. I really love her pose, and her expression is so sweet. The background really suits her too. Thank you so much for drawing Miyuki, Rayburger. My 14th attack was for user Cinnamon2Ticks and is OC Rose, aka Cure Soul. Her profile says that she lives in a mountain village where her family is responsible for the Lantern Festival every year. She dreams to one day travel to the big city and join a dance crew, as well as experience the fast-paced life that the city has to offer. I decided to draw this Cure in her civilian form. I also thought it'd be cool to design a room for her. Cinnamon associates Rose with 70s and 80s music and bright vivid colors, so I used those as inspiration for her room. I started by blocking out the shapes of the major objects in her room: her bed, dresser, and window. Flowers are a key part of her civilian design, so I made sure to include flowers as a recurring motif in her room. Another thing that I thought it would be important to include in her room was a lantern, since her family is in charge of her village's Lantern Festival. I thought it'd be a good way to show her connection to her family and village. After all the shapes were blocked off, I started sketching Rose. I drew her sitting on her bed and doing a silly little pose. For the line art, I used medium strokes for Rose in the bed, thicker strokes for the lantern, thinner lines for everything else, and this time I used the Marukin method again. Then I started to color the base colors. I knew what I wanted to color everything for the most part, except for her comforter. I tried out a couple ideas, but landed on a red-pink comforter with multicolored flowers. I fully painted this attack, but I didn't do anything super special for the first round of shading. I just followed my normal routine. I chose to set the scene at night, mainly so I could play with the lighting from the lantern in the window. First, I used a blurred screen layer for the light coming up from the window, and then I erased this light from Rose, the lantern, and the flower pot on the windowsill. Next, I added the backlighting from the window with the gouache brush. Once the window light was painted in, I started on the lantern light. I just put a blurred red hard light layer over the lantern, and on a separate screen layer, I painted in red backlighting. I did one last round of shading, added my border, an orangish multiplier layer over everything, and then my noise, and then Rose's attack was complete. I had fun with this one. I haven't designed a room in a very long time, at least since 7th grade, so this was a good practice. I think at some point soon I'll try designing rooms for my own OCs. Rose seems so sweet too. Thank you, Cinnamon2Ticks. My 15th attack was my first revenge attack, and it's for my good friend Rainburst Wabunta. They attacked me at the beginning of the month with my character Anastasia, and I'm revenging them with their character Aelki Forager. They are an Eladrin elf, and Aelki's profile says that he works for Stardo's, aka Fantasy Starbucks. While normally you'd find him at work, brewing coffees and delicious magical concoctions, currently he's having a bad time in the Feywild due to some shenanigans with the Raven Queen and our host of unruly ghosts. It doesn't say it in his profile, but his right arm got yoinked off and now has a mechanical arm. I knew going into the drawing that I wanted to draw Aelki doing his baristaing in Stardo's, which was very intimidating for me since I've never drawn a coffee shop setting before, but there's no time like the present to try it out. I found a couple references for the layout of the coffee shop, and I took some creative liberties with some of the items on the shelves. I wanted to make the coffee mugs look like beer mugs that you might find in a tavern, and I made funky looking bottles that could hold different fantastical ingredients. No Marukin method this time. I did use thick line art for the chairs, thin line art for the shelf and back counter, and medium line art for everything else though. I was really on the struggle bus for the color palette for Aelki's attack. I was able to color pick for Aelki, but everything else was up to me, and I didn't really have any solid ideas. I had to really mess around with the color of the underside of the counters. At first it was too dark, and then it was too brown, and then it wasn't dark enough. I was able to fix my issues with the countertops while I was shading. Normally I shade layer by layer, but this time I shaded over everything all at once. I imagined that Aelki could be doing some prep work before Stardust opens, so I tried lighting the scene as if the sun was starting to rise and shine through the windows. I painted the shadows with a blue gouache brush on a multiplier layer, and the highlights with a yellow gouache brush on a screen layer. I used my multiply line art effect for this one, and then I did one last pass over Aelki's eyes and the tubes he's pouring with a white gouache brush for the shinies. To bring out the setting more, I put an orange lighten layer at 30% over everything, and added my border and noise, and then Aelki's attack was done. Even though I was on the struggle bus with the setting, I still had a lot of fun drawing Aelki. Thank you Rainbow Spabunta, especially for your attack on Anya. My 16th attack was for user Lunaris Lumen Art and their OC Cure Sunfire, aka Sayuri Hirano. Her profile says that she's a 17-year-old from Japan, and she's the leader of Celestial Precure. This attack is the start of my more simple attacks, since I got more busy with work during the second half of the month. I wanted to draw Sunfire in a confident pose, and I liked the shape of her bun, so I tried to include rounder shapes throughout the rest of the attack too. I used medium line art and flat colors. Then I added a pink gradient multiply layer for the shading and minimal highlights with the white gouache pen. For the background, I did something similar to what I did for Ivory's attack, where I used the circle tool, nebula, and gouache brush to make a galaxy background. Then I added my noise, and then Sunfire's attack was done. Sunfire's design was so fun to draw. If I had more time, I would have drawn her in a more dynamic pose. I just did not have time, I fear. Thank you Lunaris Lumen Art. My 18th attack was for user Dynalix and his OC Luca. His profile says that he's a distant and gloomy boy from the photography club. He has low self-esteem and doesn't try to approach others because he gets easily irritated. Me too, Luca, me too. This was another attack that was intimidating for me, since I'm not as good as drawing more mask characters. I thought to maybe draw him like he was in a photo shoot, but I ended up not going that route. Near the end of my sketching phase, I went back and redid his eyes because it felt like they were a little bit too wide at first. I used thick lines for this attack, and I didn't do any intensive shading either. To paint in Luca's makeup and ombre in his hair, I used my gouache brush again. For this drawing, I used the multiply effect for the line art, and I really liked the star motif in Luca's design, so I decided to paint in some cute stars in the background. Then I added some gradient shading and white gouache highlights. I wanted to create a more dreamy vibe for this attack, so I put a purple soft light layer over top everything. To complete the attack, I applied my border and noise. Luca has a really fun design. I love his hat and his oversized bow on his belt. I also adore his color palette. Thank you, Dynalix! My 6th attack I got back this year was from user 7 is a cool number, and he drew my character Anastasia. This attack is so gorgeous, I love the setting. I can imagine Anya dancing under this tree. I love how you painted the leaves and the snow, and you even included the beating in her outfit. Thank you so much, 7 is a cool number. This attack is so lovely and beautiful. My 7th attack I got back this year was from user CharlieBarrett13, and they drew my character Sharon. Sharon is a new character in my ArtFight from mid-season this year. I redesigned her on a whim, and she's from the same universe as Miyuki. This is the first traditional attack I've gotten back from someone, and she's so cute here. My favorite thing about Sharon is how, since her eyes are obscured, whoever is drawing her has to rely more on her other facial features to convey her expression. I think it's fun, and I love the expression you chose. I also think that the way that you painted her green cowlick is very cute. Thank you, CharlieBarrett13. My 19th attack was another revenge attack. This time it was for 7 as a cool number, and I'm revenging him for his attack on Anastasia. I drew his OC Skylar. Her profile says that she's really into witchcraft and occult stuff, and she likes cats, the library, and dark spaces. I thought it would be cool to draw her conjuring some sort of spell. I decided against a scene for the background. I thought just some ominous cloud sparkles and a floating Skylar would be enough to give off some spooky vibes. I drew her hair and dress blowing around as if the spell she's casting was creating some sort of wind or energy strong enough to blow stuff around. I used medium line art and outlined everything with a thicker line. Then I added the base colors and a couple green multiply layers for the magical haze the spell is giving off. I used an airbrush and a gouache brush to paint the orb of light and the highlights the spell is creating. I had to lower the opacity of some of the multiply layers so that you could actually see Skylar. Next I added some more shadows and then some clouds with the cloud tool. The last step was to add my border and noise, and then she was done. I had lots of fun playing around with the shading for this attack. Thank you for your attack on Anya. 7 is a cool number. My 9th attack I got back this year was from Paper Menace, and they attacked me with my character Sharon. Sharon is one of my spoiled OCs this year. Paper Menace drew her in a chibi style, and she's so cute. I love the attention to detail, and the leaves you put in her hair bows are adorable. I also really like the note paper-esque background. I feel like this would be the kind of paper she would use while taking orders at the cafe she works at. Thank you, Paper Menace! My 20th attack was for Charlie Barrett, 13. This was another revenge attack, this time for their attack on Sharon. I decided to draw their character Agnes Amethyst. Her profile says that she's a wild child, stubborn, peace-loving, and sarcastic, and she's also a magical human. I wanted to draw her in a pose with more movement since her hair and sleeves and bottoms are very flowy. I used medium line art with a thicker outline again, and I only put down the base colors. I forgot about her flower belt at first, so I had to go back and add it in after the fact. I added another circle galaxy background, and I wanted to include some of the same flowers from her top, but I didn't like how that looked, so I just did some flower doodles with my gouache pen. For the shading, I just kept it simple again, with an orange gradient multiplier layer. I drew in the shinies in her eyes and applied the noise, and then the attack was done. This attack was quick but fun. I had fun with her hair and flower patterns. Thank you again for your attack on Sharon, Charlie Barrett 13. My 10th attack I got back this year was another mass attack. This time it was from user Hazelens. She included my character Cure Romance and a Precure mass attack, and I'm so honored to have been included in another mass attack. It's been a dream of mine to have one of my Precure characters picked for a big mass attack. And oh my goodness, you turned my Cure Romance into a marketable plushie, and I could not be more happy about it. She's so baby here. I love her pose and her expression. She's giving, yeah, I could beat you up, but I'm a cutie pie, so what are you gonna do about it vibes, and I'm here for it. Thank you so much for including Romance Hazelens. My 21st attack was a revenge attack for Hazelens' mass attack that included my Cure Romance. I chose to revenge her back with her character Ida Tagame, aka Cure Sugar. Her profile says that Sugar is curious, clever, and shy. She's a magical girl that's based on a chef, and I thought it would be cool to draw her baking something, so I drew her in a kitchen scene. I started with her pose. I drew her holding a bowl and a whisk, and then I sketched out the rest of the kitchen and her outfit. I used thicker lines for the closest counter, thinner lines for the far counter and cabinets, and medium lines for sugar and everything else. Then I moved on to adding all the base colors in before starting to render everything. I don't think it's too obvious in the final drawing, but I textured Sugar's hair with a gouache brush. I also used a cloud brush to texture the flower in the bowl and on the counter. At first I wasn't planning on shading all of the kitchen tiles, but then I found that I had time to, so why not? I copy-pasted the shading for the tiles, which ended up taking longer than it probably would have if I just did it all by hand. I learned my lesson while I was highlighting the tiles, and I did those by hand instead. Once the shading was done, I added the multiply line effect, my highlights, a pink multiply layer over everything, and my border and noise. Cure Sugar's attack was done. I really enjoyed working on the background for this one. Pure Sugar also has such an adorable design. Thank you so much for including romance in your Precure Mass Attack, Hazelint. My 20-second attack was for user March Club and their OC June, aka Kier Copper. Her profile says that she's a big fan of romance novels and geology, and she enjoys fossil hunting and info dumping about different rocks. Since June likes romance novels, I wanted to draw her on a hill in front of a cherry blossom tree, kind of something out of a shoujo anime. I used medium line art for the entire attack and then laid down the base colors. For the flowers on the ground, the grass and tree texturing, and the clouds, I used the cloud brush. Then I used the multiply line art effect and put coral multiply and screen layer gradients over everything for the shading. I added the highlights with a white gouache brush and painted in the petals with a pink gouache brush. The attack was done after my border and noise were added, of course. June seems like such a sweetie, and I enjoyed making this little attack for her. Thank you, March Club! My 23rd attack was for user Awkward Sauce and their OC Ivory, aka Kier Teddy. Her profile says that she's a middle schooler who makes and repairs toys for a living. She comes across as quite brash and irresponsible, but she's got a very caring side and is really good with kids. This was another quick attack. I wanted the composition to be similar to Agnes and Sunfire's attacks, where Teddy would be standing in front of a simple galaxy background. I drew her in a kind of playful pose. I thought it would communicate her personality well. I used medium line art with a thicker border for Teddy's attack. After I filled the base colors in, I added a teal multiply gradient for the shading. I wanted to include both of her main colors into the galaxy background, and at first ended up looking too muddied, but I was able to fix it by using an orange galaxy brush to get the orange in, instead of blurring it into the teal base. To finish the attack, I added the white outline around Teddy, some gouache stars, and my noise. Teddy's design is so cute. I love how simple her dress and palette is. She's a character that I would imagine to be really easy to draw over and over again. Thank you, Awkward Sauce! My second to last attack I got back was also a revenge attack, from Jazales. They got me back for my attack on Liz, and they drew another one of my magical girl OCs, Vipka. Vipka is so adorable in this attack. I love that you included both of her designs and her fairy bear. She's so cute in your style, and you even remembered her little star sticker on her face. I really love the background too. I feel like it really fits her. Thank you so much again, Jazales. My penultimate attack was another 2-for-1 for user Kitsune Mist 88. They're both alien characters. Michi's profile says that it likes oranges, napping in small dark places, and cat toys. Étoile's profile says that she likes bows and ribbons, Neapolitan ice cream, sparkles, and her alien magical girlfriends. I decided to draw them both floating in space. Originally I was only going to draw Étoile, but then I found Michi's profile and I thought its design was so cute, I had to include it. I used medium and thick line art for their attack. I actually filled in the background and base colors at the same time for this one. I used a blue galaxy around Michi and a green and pink galaxy for the rest of the background. I had to use the multiply line art effect, of course. I added a white outline around Michi and Étoile, and I did this on separate layers again, like what I did for Odette's attack. For the shading, I used a blue and pink multiply gradient around Michi and Étoile, respectively. Then I added my border, but the attack didn't feel bright enough still, so I put a 65% pink saturation layer over everything, and that really helped. Lastly, I added the white gouache highlights in, as well as my noise, and then they were done! Michi and Étoile are both very cute characters. I really want to know more about their universe. Like, what do the responsibilities of a magical girl alien entail? Thank you, Kitsune Mist 88! My final attack was for user Illusory and his OC Alina Gentile. She's a magical girl with teleportation powers, and her element is pure energy. I was running out of time for this attack. I was working on hers the last night of ArtFight, so I kept it simple. Initially, I wanted to draw her full design, but to save time, I switched to a half-body attack for her. I thought it'd be nice to draw her in a pose that would show off how poofy and flowy her dress are. I used medium and thick lines for this one, and after I put down the base colors, I added pink multiply and screen gradient layers for the shading. I did another galaxy background for Alina's attack, and then drew in the white gouache highlights, stars, and hearts. Finally, I applied the noise, and with that, Alina's attack was done, and so was my 2025 ArtFight season. I really love drawing Alina. I love how pink her design is. Thank you, Illusory! I got one last attack back before the end of the season though. It all comes full circle because this attack was for my good friend Beelzebub, who I attacked at the very beginning of the season. They drew my magical girls Anastasia and Odine. They're very cutesy in this attack. I've been wanting some couples art of them. I bet Vibka's the one videotaping them, and I imagine she's giggling at them from behind the camera. I really love the new outfits you gave them too, especially Odine's shirt with the moon phase sleeves. I may have to steal that from you. Thank you so much, Belza. That's it, we reached the end! Thank you so much for sitting through this very, very long video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And thanks to all the artists who allowed me to include my attacks on their characters in this video, and to the artists who allowed me to include the attacks they made for me as well. I really enjoyed drawing all of your characters and love all the attacks I got back. I hope everyone had a wonderful ArtFight. I hope I'll see you all next season, and I hope to see you guys in my next video, whenever that shall be. Goodbye!